Station gang, it's your boy Stu from Dr. Doom's Fan Club, back with another installment of Surrounded by Short Boxes, a spotlight on some of my favorite back issues from the personal collection and what I love about them so much. Today, we take a trip to the glorious and chaotic year in comic books that was 1994 and talk about a book that was a glitch in the matrix for that time in so many ways. It's Marvel's issue number 3, written by Kurt Busiek and gorgeously illustrated by Alex Ross, who announces his arrival on the comic book scene in a big way with this 4-issue epic. This series has had a profound impact on me. It's a cornerstone of my comic book reading and collecting, a book that has bridged the gap for me in a number of ways. So after being a kid immersed in the hobby as a youngster and eventually losing touch with it in the late 90s, it was rediscovering Marvels during the COVID lockdown that jump-started my love for comic books years later as an adult. So join me as I talk about why I love this series and this issue so much. Published in 1994, Marvels is an artistic anomaly for its time. Ross's Norman Rockwell meets George Perez style of art that announced itself in this 4-issue miniseries looked nothing like the other comic books on the shelves at the time. In an era of the game where we were obsessed with gimmicky covers, crossover events, and the image style of illustration, this aberration of a book was able to find life and sustain itself, and that speaks to its timeless vision, its unbelievable artwork, and the staying power of its story. Now, there were some seriously seismic changes afoot. The speculation bubble was about to pop. Marvel's poor spending decisions from throughout the decade had put bankruptcy on the horizon, but the evergreen aesthetic and the old but new glow of Marvel's will forever free it from the confining chains of topical timeliness. We can take a look at the best of the rest from Marvel for 1994 and tell that our standards of quality were hurting just a bit. For me, there are really only 3 highlights I would personally point to. You got Walt Simonson's criminally underrated time on Fantastic Four. You got Ron Lim and Ron Mars and their run on Silver Surfer, and Larry Hama and Adam Kubert's time on Wolverine. X-Men did have the wedding of Jean and Scott at the beginning of the year, which was aight, but then the Phalanx Covenant was dead on arrival. Now, we got some straight gems from the world of indie comics in 1994. Michael Allred's Madman, Frank Miller's Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, all came out that year. Oh wait, never mind, y'all, I forgot. 94 gave us the Spider-Man Clone Saga. Yay!
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
When it came to the Marvel's creative team, writer Kurt Busiek and artist Alex Ross were basically nobodies at the time. Busiek was a freelance writer, getting gigs here and there, and had actually previously worked in Marvel's sales department. Ross had only done a couple things beforehand. He had teamed up with Ron Fortier on a Terminator adaptation in 1990. He had done some work with Miracle Man in 1992 and also worked on a few issues of the Marvel Comics adaptation for Hellraiser in that same year. Initially, he had been pitching Marvel on an anthology-style book featuring both his art and work from other painters, all telling 2 to 3 page short stories. But Busiek, quote, thought he needed a story, something with a beginning, middle, and end, and a character whose story would run through the thing, tie it all together. We talked about a lot of dumb ideas, but by the time Marvel editor Marcus McLaurin asked us for a pitch, I think we were already talking about a photojournalist, someone who'd take pictures of all this cool stuff and see the ways it was all developing, building into a new kind of world. Along with Ross, Kurt helped develop the character of Phil Sheldon, a photographer, and the brilliant, flawed, and humanistic lens through which we bear witness to the inception of the superhero era in Marvel's. According to Busiek, it was editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco's suggestion that they use the big events from Marvel's history as the timeline in which Phil Sheldon lived in. And so the story begins with the creation of the original Human Torch, Jim Hammond, in 1939, and winds and weaves its way through a variety of seminal Marvel events until its dramatic conclusion with Gwen Stacy's death in the 1970s. Busiek would go on to say, quote, "So it felt like with limited space, we had to make choices that would move the story along, see things developing rather than covering similar ground. And of course, we had a story to tell about Phil, wanting to see him travel an arc from Wonder in issue 1 to concern in issue 2, faith in issue 3, and disillusionment in issue 4. So we picked moments that would help with that. End quote. Phil Sheldon's everyman energy is how we experience this terrific and terrifying photorealistic age of Marvels. We are part and parcel to his hopes and dreams, but also his fears and his fickleness. As the man off the street, Phil's vulnerable relatability and his character progression through his actions and attitudes towards superheroes is one of the very best elements of the book. When it came to the physical format of the book, Ross wanted it to be printed in the prestige format like he had seen done in the late 80s and early 90s by both Marvel and DC for landmark books like Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. Prestige books are printed on better quality paper with a cardstock cover and typically come with a higher page count and a higher price tag. Busiek and Ross worked under the radar for over a year on the book, with Kurt talking through the stories with Ross while he was writing them, and Ross sending Busiek back the art in its early stages so Kurt can make suggestions. One of the most impressive feats of the book is how Busiek streamlined the birth of the Marvel Universe. After digging through what had to be a metric ton of back issues in order to select and frame the right moments and his retelling of this history, and sheesh did this man do his homework, y'all. For example, just in issue 3 alone here, we have got at least 25 comic books referenced and used in the storytelling. Everything from Galactus' arrival in Fantastic Four, 48, 49, and 50 to Atuma flooding the Eastern Seaboard and Avengers number 27. Issue 1 uses the early Human Torch, Namor, and Captain America comics of the 1940s as its template, introducing superheroes to this universe, or Marvels, as Phil Sheldon coins them. At first, the people of New York City don't know whether to celebrate or criminalize these extraordinary individuals. There is a lot of fear and anxiety in the air. Our opening sequence in issue 1 is the beautifully rendered awakening of Jim Hammond, the Human Torch, and his confused narration as he is being displayed by his creator, Phineas Horton. And Jim's reaction to the public's fear of him throughout this book is hauntingly beautiful. We witness the Human Torch with Phil face discrimination in a diner and later engage in an epic fight against Namor for the fate of the city until the two are able to come to a truce. The battle terrifies Phil so badly that he calls off his engagement to his fiancée Doris, citing the fact that the city's unsafe, but Doris ain't having it, and she up and leaves Phil. A year later, Captain America shows up. It's the birth of the super soldier. And soon after, Phil sees Doris in a movie with another dude and realizes the error of his ways and makes amends and gets his girl back. We also see the early dichotomy of Namor the Submariner in this issue, who at first is seen in newsreels, lending a helping hand with Torch against Germany, but then word comes that he has turned heel. And soon enough, he brings his frothy fury to the East Coast. As a giant tidal wave consumes New York City, Phil decides he is done hiding in fear, and he heads to the roof of the building to take some photos. But debris comes crashing down on top of him, and our boy wakes up in the hospital to find he has lost his left eyeball. Yo! But Phil soldiers on, he marries Doris, and together they travel to Europe, where Phil covers Captain America, who's fighting with Namor, who's on the good side again. He's with the good guys again, and the Allied war effort against the Nazis. Now, issue 2 largely focuses on the X-Men and the mutant paranoia that is sweeping the nation at the time. And it seems our boy Phil still has a little bit of resentment over losing that eyeball. He finds himself so caught up in the violence and the vitriol towards the children of the Atom that old Phil throws a friggin' brick at Iceman. Dang, Phil! But later in the book, and again later in time, we see Phil's progression from his previous shameful stoning of Bobby Drake when he and his family discover a young mutant girl, Maggie, who's in grave danger and hide her away in their house, fearful for her well-being, with anti-mutant sentiment at an all-time high. On the same night as the wedding of Sue Storm and Reed Richards, Boulevard Trask comes on TV and tells us that he is releasing his deadly sentinels into the population, but soon these mutant-killing robots rebel against their programming, and the city erupts in madness. We got violent mobs hunting down mutants on the street. Phil's impulse is to take out his camera and start taking photos, turning the mirror back on humanity, reflecting the truth of our characters. Disgusted with his fellow human beings, though, he has to rush home, worried about Maggie, and he finds that she is gone, having left a letter that she wanted to leave before Phil and his family paid the price for helping her out. And the issue tragically ends here with Phil and his daughter lamenting Maggie's unknown fate. So, issue 3, today's topic of discussion. Let's get into it, gang. First off, I've been forgetting to show love to these incredible covers from the books that I've been talking about. So let's marinate on this one for a second. Ross's Silver Surfer is simply exquisite, and this still shot of his arrival on Earth and the approach of the Human Torch through the reflection in his chest is just mwah! Chef's kiss. Incredible stuff. Every single cover in this series is a stunner, but this one and the battle it heralds is such a beautiful moment. Now, when the issue opens, we are still in the 1960s here as far as timelines go. And as we continue, we see Phil is now developing a book titled Marvels, which will feature his own photographs of the superheroes in action. And at the same time, he's also working with Bugle reporter Ben Urich on a piece about Tony Stark for the paper. Ben Urich soon gets a tip that the Avengers have been declared a menace and that the mayor is going to be ordering them to disband, but the opposite turns out to be the case. Phil attends a press conference, which is for Avengers Day, where the mayor apologizes and claims that their enemies had them framed and made it look like they went berserk. Phil kind of accepts this, but he wonders if this is really the truth or just another story that he is being fed. At the same time, Phil is struggling to finish his book, wondering if the bottom is going to fall out of this entire project, given the national sentiment for superheroes is starting to trend more and more in a negative direction, as we see the media start going after Tony Stark and bringing him before congressional committees. Now, Phil, all preoccupied with work and all its burdens and deadlines, visits the zoo with his family one day, though he is barely present there with them. At the zoo, the water level starts rising until the Sheldons have to seek refuge on a bench, and they learn from a nearby radio that Atuma is actually responsible for the rising tides. In reference to Busiek and Ross really doing their homework when it came to these Silver Age stories, I love this sequence here as Phil, his family, and other bystanders listen in as the radio broadcasts the events of Avengers vs. Atuma. Very, very cool to see how Busiek and Ross reference Hawkeye, also the creature of the sea that they do battle with, and the Avengers underwater gear that is all there and present in Don Heck's fantastic illustrations from Avengers number 27. A man wearing a Judgment Day poster and spouting apocalyptic ramblings the entire time is blaming it on the super beans, and this kind of shows us the beginning of the decline of the novelty and the popularity of soups. We see this sequence where publicity is really starting to trend in an explicitly negative direction. No one is immune here, and I love how Busiek was weaving this needle through the headlines and news stories of all these superheroes facing public dissent. There's Spider-Man and Jonah Jameson going at it. Fantastic Four battles with Dragon Man are backing up traffic. We got the Hulk attacking the White House, and Daredevil being accused of murder. And Busiek is finding these headlines in Silver Age classics like Amazing Spider-Man number 34, Fantastic Four number 45, Daredevil number 14. It's brilliant. I love the attention both of these creators paid to the littlest of details in this book. It really goes a long way with me. Even these little throwaway scenes have references and moments that they pay homage to, and that is not lost on me. With this onslaught of bad press, even Phil finds himself double guessing his opinion on the Marvels and the superheroes, comparing their birth to the advent of atomic power, saying it had once been thought of as a, quote, shining miracle, end quote, before it became, quote, something to fear, end quote. So on the day that Phil and Ben Urich are set to complete this Tony Stark piece, old Phil's just walking down the street. I love throughout this series how he's constantly blindsided by these superhero battles and events, right? And we get another case of that here. The sky erupts into fire. This immediately causes panic and hysteria in the streets. Now, just in reference to the Human Torch here and Ross doing fire and flame in general, On the 25th anniversary of this book, he spoke about how the absence of comic book art that he felt truly nailed the look of Fire and Flame motivated him to capture it accurately and draw us a Human Torch, the likes of which we had never seen before.
But to take something where graphically had never really been brought to life in this way, where you'd have a lot of work to do to make a man on fire seem plausible, unless you're just literally having a burning man dying in front of you, making it seem somehow like it's a person who is living fire. I studied flame. I took lots of photographs of objects on fire, a little head bust and a figure I made on fire, just so I could see how the flames might lick around a form.
And man, did he understand the assignment. To this day, Ross's flame is my favorite flame of all flame.
Your art was the prettiest art of all the art.
Thank you.
But the sky of fire appears to be just an illusion. It's not giving off any heat, y'all. It soon disappears, but then we get a sky full of space debris in its place. And through the boulders and the debris, we get the emergence of the Silver Surfer, and Torch immediately flies up and does his best to try to engage him, but really it's too late. Surfer has already signaled and summoned his master, and Galactus arrives, announcing his plan to drain the life out of the planet. Every single time we see Ross illustrate Galactus in this sequence, you're going to be floored. I always have to pick my jaw up off the floor when I reread it. Ross's Galactus is everything you want from the Devourer of Worlds, and he does such a marvelous job taking Kirby's ideas and making them somehow feel even bigger and even bolder. You feel every bit of Big G's imposing presence as he tells planet Earth he's about to drink their milkshake.
I drink it up!
The Fantastic Four spring into action and attack Galactus, but Torch has his flame extinguished, and the rest of the team can't even really get close to him because of the atmospheric disturbances. After Torch goes down, Galactus begins to prepare his energy converter, and the people of Earth begin to panic and lose hope, desperate that their heroes have seemingly failed. But the Thing wreaks havoc on Galactus's energy converting machine, and with the help of Reed, they're able to knock Galactus from his perch, but they are soon waylaid on the street by one of Galactus's Punishers, and his Fists of Fury. I just love this scene. Wild Silver Age fun. As the fight rages on, people panic and the scene looks dim. Phil believes in his heart of hearts that the Earth will end, and he goes home to spend time with his family. But people are leaving their cars out on the road, and he abandons his cab ride halfway home, witnessing all kinds of reactions from humanity to the appearance of the World Devourer. There is some looting, but people are mostly scared. He even sees some kids jumping rope, kind of oblivious to what's happening. I love that scene. Sees a dude drowning his last moments in alcohol, partying it up. As Galactus begins to fight with the Silver Surfer, the streets empty out. Everyone's heading home to spend their final moments and Earth's final moments with the ones they love, and Phil does the same. This Galactus battle is the highlight of not only the issue, but the series as a whole to me. If you ask somebody about Alex Ross's Marvels, I think this is the first thing that is generally going to jump to their mind. Other intense and epic Marvel events are rendered by Ross inside this series and beautifully done, but to me, none on the scale that is present here. Ross and Busiek take Kirby moment after Kirby moment, and they pump it full of paint and protein, from Ben Grimm trying to punch the Silver Surfer on the roof, to the Kirby tech that makes up Galactus's energy conversion machine, to the Thing breaking off a piece of that and doing his best with Reed to topple Big G, to Big G finding his feet and getting back up, extinguishing Human Torch's flame, all his interactions with the Silver Surfer. It's so well researched and adapted. And as I mentioned earlier, his execution and taking Kirby's mega ideas and making them feel not only bigger, but realer at the same time. It's pure comic book wonder, And sequences like this are what I chase as a reader. It's just perfection here from Busiek and Ross for me, and it will live forever. It's some of the greatest comic book art that we've ever seen, in my opinion. Suddenly, however, news comes that the Fantastic Four have managed to defeat Galactus, saved Earth. We see replays in the news of the battle, Reed threatening Galactus with a device which we know to be the ultimate nullifier. And though the people of Earth don't know exactly what happened, they understand what happened. In the wake of the Fantastic Four's victory, Sheldon promises to devote more time to the important things in life and be there more with his family. However, though there is a sense of relief the world over, humanity soon rears up its ugly head again. We see J. Jonah Jameson calling Galactus an outright hoax. Phil is disgusted by the way the public has turned away from gratitude and again chosen to attack their heroes. At the Bugle, he tries to argue his point with Jonah to no avail, just as Peter Parker shows up right in the nick of time with pictures making, quote, old Spidey look terrible, and Phil just can't stand it. He's disgusted. He walks away, muttering under his breath. And I love the little "who, me?" look on Peter's face here by Ross. Fantastic. After promising his family he was going to be there for all the important things in life and taking them out for ice cream, Phil immediately leaves them when he's called away by a colleague. Count Nefarious taking on the X-Men in DC. On his way to hail a cab, he passes a group of people who are spouting anti-mutant hate speech yet again. This time, Phil has had enough. Enraged, he asks them, "Are you so busy digging for garbage you can't even admit to yourselves that you're grateful? Look up, why don't you, for once in your lives? Look up." And it is with that sentiment that our issue concludes. I love Marvel's number 3 for the epic and entertaining retelling of the Marvel Universe it provides us, while also giving us a relatable lens through which to view these extraordinary events. It was a book that looked nothing like what was popular or in demand at the time of its release, yet it still found astronomical success in spite of it. It's a love letter to the Silver Age of comics, sure, but it's also a reminder from an era of excess that sometimes a strong and simple story with some brilliant art is all we really need. Most of all, this is the book that introduced me and so many more to the immense and immortal talent of Alex Ross, an artist who I would go on to develop a deep love and affinity for that continues to flourish still today. Busiek and Ross bet on themselves in a big way with Marvel's, and it changed their lives and their careers. Ross became a superstar overnight and would soon head over to DC and fine-tune some of the ideas that he was already playing with here in Marvel's and create yet another timeless superhero miniseries in Kingdom Come. Another book centered around the clash of generations, both past and present, which he would write with Mark Waid. Busiek would also find sizable success, though it did take him somewhat of a longer road to get there. He would later hook up again with Ross for the criminally underrated Astro City, a great series if you ever get the time to check it out. They're all self-contained stories, so just pick one up and see how you like it. But Kurt would really solidify his name writing one of the all-time great Avengers runs with George Perez on art, and I also encourage you guys to pick that one up and give it a read. That's it for me this time, gang. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure you like this video and are subscribed to Dr. Doom's fan club so you don't miss any more great comic book content. Until next time, stay